Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar talking about driving IT success with the right training. My name is Michelle, and I'll be your MC for the next hour. Now, before we get started with the presentation, I want to cover the webinar functionalities. During the presentation, everyone's microphones will be muted, but we want this to be an open discussion. So if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. There will be a dedicated question and answer session at the end of the presentation, but I encourage you to ask your questions as they come up, whether they're specific to your IT organization or generally speaking. Today's webinar is being recorded and we'll send a copy out to everyone by the end of the week. Our speaker today is Brian Carlson, who's the Director of Sales at ExitCertified Tech Data with an extensive background in the IT training industry. Brian and myself are fortunate to work for an industry-leading and award-winning IT training organization. Brian has a passion for learning about new IT trends and technologies, and then working with customers to understand their IT organization's current skill set and help them develop programs to prepare their workers for these changes. Technologies evolve at a rapid pace, and we find it exciting to continually be able to help customers keep pace with the latest trends. All right, let's get started with the conversation. Brian, you can take it away.
Hey, thank you, Michelle. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining in today. We're excited to have the opportunity to talk with you and share a little bit about what we're seeing here at ExitCertified. So just to give you a quick background, so ExitCertified is a part of Tech Data. We are an IT training company focused solely on delivering technical training to IT professionals across both vendor authorized offerings as well as a lot of open source. And so we work with all kinds of customers, large and small, to bring this training to them. So we've got a pretty broad portfolio of offerings. So again, we're happy to have the opportunity to talk with everybody here today. As Michelle mentioned, we do want this to be a bit conversational. I know that can be tough with microphones muted, and so please use the chat. And if needed, we can certainly turn your microphone on, and we can have a verbal exchange if needed. So feel free to ask for your microphone if you would like. And we'd be more than happy to field your questions that way or via chat. So here's the agenda here for today. Again, we do want this to be a little conversational. The reason we're putting this webinar on is for the past few years, we've really heard a lot of the same things from customers across verticals. Including government and financials, and really across verticals, small, medium, and large-sized customers. And so we wanted to put this on and just really share a little bit about what we've seen and what we've learned over the past few years. We know that there's other companies out there that are working through these changes. Technology is evolving very, very rapidly, and so that's the goal here of the webinar today, is to arm you with a little more information to hopefully help you get where you need to be as far as making sure your teams have the skills they need to be successful. So a little more on that. So here's a couple numbers here talking about some of the trends that are seen in the industry. Obviously a huge portion of companies, almost half, are doing some kind of digital transformation. I know that's really kind of a buzzword, and sometimes people ask, what the heck does that mean? But essentially, what we are seeing are companies completely overhauling how they do IT, from a cloud native microservices perspective, the complete new architectures, data and analytics. These new architectures and technologies are opening up the opportunity to do a whole lot more with data, and companies are rushing to take advantage of that. Continue to see trends along DevOps and Agile, that becoming more and more important as folks are moving to these new architectures. And then security is really big, obviously. So those are some of the bigger areas we're seeing changes, and then you can trickle down from there into the skills that they're needing to develop and needing to have. But what we are seeing is customers are completely overhauling how they do things. And to do that, a huge portion of the IT spend is going to be aligned with those changes. And part of it's going to keep the lights on, part of it's going to deal with the day-to-day and some of the things that are remaining relatively stable. But a huge portion of the funding now is going into completely overhauling how IT works. And the need is absolutely there because if your company is not keeping up with these trends, your competitors are. And so companies that don't make these investments in new IT and new technologies are going to be left behind, and they're going to have systems that are faster and cheaper and more scalable. And they're going to be able to bring those to market and be able to release products quicker and do more with the information that they've got. And so everybody is recognizing this and moving very quickly. And the big gap is, or one of the big challenges is making sure that they're actually getting out of it what they're investing. And so there's a big concern over that as well. With over half of IT leaders saying that is one of their biggest concerns. And obviously, like any new tool, be it IT or whatever type of tooling you're using or whatever type of technology you're using, is making sure that the people know how to use those new tools and new technologies is of utmost importance, because it doesn't do you any good if you've got this new platform or new technology or new cloud platform or what have you. It's not going to do any good if folks don't know how to use it, and if they don't know how to use the features to their fullest and take advantage, then that's a huge miss. And so some of the numbers that we've been seeing is a large portion of the workforce, they need new skills. Folks have been building monolithic applications for decades, and microservices are certainly not that. And so understanding how to use Kubernetes and Docker and other PaaS platforms to achieve this is a new skill set. And so making sure that the workers with the historical knowledge and understanding of how the company works have these new skills is very important. Same with data and analytics. Now that we've got these huge new data sets, this is a whole new discipline that has come out of this, and companies are training their IT employees and how to do this. Similarly with security, there's always a new threat every day. So struggling to keep up with those new tools and new threats that are out there. So a huge portion of the workforce, they do need to be reskilled. Some of the old skills are still relevant and important, but the new skills are they're in high demand. So those are some of the big areas that we've seen. I'll kind of pause here as we go along to see, Michelle, I think you said we have a question.
We do. So from here, we are seeing that training is important to stay relevant. But one of our audience members says that it's hard to get approval to have the whole team away from the office for this training, and they're pretty sure they're not the only ones. How would you address this concern?
So this is probably one of the top objections we get when we talk about training with customers, even customers that have been traditional training company or training customers and ones that we've done programs with before. This concern comes up on probably over half the engagements we work on, and it comes up in a couple different forms. The first one is we can't have people out of the office; they need to be on the job, working, building this product so we can release it and hit our deadlines. The biggest objection, or the biggest thing to think about there is, well, how much quicker would a knowledgeable employee be? How much rework and error how many errors can you reduce? How can you reduce the rework of having to go rebuild something correctly? And then what's the cost and inefficiency of moving, if you're moving through your production process? So that's the biggest that's one of the biggest responses is, look, how much more time are you going to get out of, how much more are you going to get out of your people for the time they save because they know what they're doing? We also hear, we can't have the whole team out of the office at the same time. That's certainly understandable. And so we've been able to be flexible as far as breaking deliveries into 2 different sessions or 3 different sessions or however many are needed to be sure customers can staff production systems while part of their teams are getting trained. And we've also seen a lot of interest in breaking classes into shorter sessions. We don't want to stretch it out too long because there are some negatives that come from that, but you reducing, say, an 8-hour day down to 5 hours is something we've seen that's been pretty popular. We've also seen customers wanting to, say, take a 4-day class and deliver it say in 6 shorter sessions over 2 weeks, something like that, right? So we certainly can be flexible with the hours we run the training, if that's of need. But we do get that question a lot of, hey, how do we deal with having people out of the office? And there's certainly some points we can arm you with to help go back and get those approvals when needed. Any other questions, Michelle?
All for right now.
Good. All right. So some of the business challenges we see with IT, with folks that are either an IT professional or an IT manager trying to get training, or maybe you're an HR or a learning and development person trying to get training. The biggest challenge we see now is, how do you source and manage training? Years ago, a lot of IT solutions, a lot of times were from one or a few number of vendors, some of the bigger vendors out there. And a lot of their solutions were top to bottom. So when you went and you installed, a new database that connected to an ERP system, it all flowed through. When you made the purchase, a lot of times maybe you got training credits, or the OEM would have a training path that would, have a training for a database job role and a developer job role and a sysadmin job role, and all those job roles would be defined by the OEM. And you would see those at the time of purchase of the systems, or you could very easily find them by going to that OEM's website. And OEMs are still very important, and they're absolutely part of the solution. But one of the biggest trends we've seen is technology's moving to multi-vendor. So you're no longer using the full stack of one. From one vendor, you're using multiple vendors at each layer. And then the biggest emergence is open source. And there's not an OEM you can go to, or not a manufacturer you can go to for open source training necessarily. And so customers are using this combination of multi-vendor and also open source technologies inside of their systems. And it's really difficult to go and find the training you need, and also ensure you got the quality you need. And so that's probably one of the biggest trends and challenges we've seen, is a big gap opening up because the manufacturer is no longer there at the point of sale to make that training recommendation. And so that's an area that we recognized several years ago and built some capabilities around solutioning for. And so at this point, all of our biggest customers are using multi-vendor and open source solutions. And we're building programs for them that are that address all of these things. And so that's the first challenge we see. Skill sets are out of date. And, a lot of times they're more out of date than companies realize. We have a lot of companies that come in and they've got brilliant IT folks, that have been with the company for 15 or 20 years, but they're doing things that came out 10, 15 years ago. They're really good at those types of things. And so when you talk about something like microservices, or you talk about something like DevOps, you no longer see the big monolithic application designs and systems designs that you used to. They're broken into the smaller pieces, and that's a different mentality. The second is, in DevOps, that's a complete cultural shift. And so we see a lot of skill sets that are used to that distinct developer, operations, administrator job role, where that's really kind of not really around as much anymore. And so that's another challenge, is the skill sets are out of date. They're also having problems finding finding new talent. So sometimes customers will say, well, we're not going to train our existing people. We're just going to go out and hire new people with these skill sets. Well, the two challenges there are, one is they're tough to find. And the second challenge is, even if you hire them this year, next year, they're going to need some new skills because things are moving so quickly. And so the great ones you hired 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of those folks are needing these skills as well, because things have changed and the company has come along. Maybe you hired that person, 2 or 3 years ago and they got things started. Well, now you got 100 people that are supporting the systems or building onto the systems that person you hired 3 years ago helped to champion. And those people now need training. And so customers are not able to go out and just hire the talent they need and hire the skills they need. They are finding they're having to go out and reskill a large portion of the workforce just because the transformation's so fast. And that moves in, I guess I kind of covered the last point, is the things are changing so quickly that it's tough to hire for it, and it's tough to get them to self-learn for it as well. Michelle, I think you said you had a question on this one as well.
We do. We have another audience question. So this user's organization is looking at training from 2 different cloud providers at this time, and they want to know how ExitCertified fits into that conversation and if there are any advantages of coming to ExitCertified.
So that's, I think I kind of touched on that as well, but that's something that's opened up for us. We offer a bunch of different vendor authorized training solutions, but a ton of gray market. And what we've seen is that a lot of these customers, say they're moving to one of the public cloud providers. A public cloud provider has classes on things like machine learning and containers and analytics and things like that. And those tools are great and they're absolutely necessary. But the folks that they're going to have support these new tools, they don't know the basics of machine learning or artificial intelligence, data science. You need to know, the fundamentals of machine learning and those kinds of things before you can use the tools from a cloud provider and be successful with them. And the same thing with Python, believe it or not, is probably the most popular development language we're seeing now. And so when folks are moving into a data analytics role, so much of that's done with Python, and they lack the basic Python skills. And so what we've seen a lot of success doing is partnering up with those OEMs or the cloud providers in this example, and saying, look, we offer both options. We offer all the classes you're going to need. And what we'd recommend is say, why don't you start off, you structure people off with a 3-day introduction to Kubernetes and containers and Docker class, get them familiar with those tools and those technologies and how those work. And then let's move them into the authorized offering that talks about how you run containers inside of this public cloud provider. And so what we kind of talk about it is the topics between the vendors, right? It's those just baseline level skills and understanding that they need to have before they're going to understand and get the most out of the tools, the public cloud tools that they're moving towards. So yes, there's definitely some value in working with a provider like ExitCertified to tie all those pieces together and put together a true comprehensive multi-vendor solution. I see another question from Training is the best. It's been in years. Not so with software use or cloud. Bytes are not helping. Yes. So I think, Kevin, what the participant is saying, and thank you for submitting a comment, is the part of the problem that we do hear from customers is that when they go into a vendor's class around cloud, actually, let me back up a little bit. Obviously, cloud is huge, and folks are racing to the cloud, and the vendors have realized that there's a huge opportunity, but they've got to capture it now. And so feedback we've gotten from our customers is their perception is that a lot of the cloud or the OEM's training is a bit of a marketing fluff. It's got a little bit of promotional material in there that they doesn't do them any good getting the cloud set up and running. Although we offer training from a lot of different providers, we're not aligned to just one. And so that's an area that we've certainly been able to help is reduce some of the promotional items and focus more on the hardcore tech skills. So the comment there, yeah, we've definitely seen that from folks, from customers. I'm just scrolling down here to see. Yeah. And then the other comment there was use our cloud fights are not helping. So to this participant's point, that's an area that we certainly help with is kind of cutting through everything and focusing on the skills that are needed. Thank you for the comment. And again, please feel free to put comments in the chat. And if you'd like to have your mic opened up, just ask. We'd be happy to do that for you. All right, so jumping into a little bit more about how we approach the customers and help them work through where they need to be. So we have 5 stages essentially to how we put together and deliver these programs. So we're just going to walk through those at a high level. So first one is really requirements gathering. When you work with a customer, we've sometimes we've had customers describe this part of the process as a bit of a therapy session because they have different groups inside the organization that have different initiatives, different opinions of their own capabilities. They, a lot of times they don't really understand what their employees' true skill set is. And so working through here is really getting an understanding of where are they going as an organization. Like that's where it all starts. Is what's the initiative for the organization? One of the downsides of all the open source tools out there now are there's so many of them, and you see a lot of folks using different tools, different languages, doing different things differently because there's great options and to do things differently, right? And we don't have an opinion on if one is right or wrong. The challenge there is when you've got you're using all these different tools and processes, it causes a lot of confusion. And so when we get into the requirements gathering process, we work with all the managers, we work with the stakeholders who want to participate, and we even oftentimes do surveys and do maybe short interviews with some of the frontline folks, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just to really get an understanding of what they're doing, what their team's skill sets are, and corroborate what we're hearing from the higher levels. So we start there and really focus on getting a great understanding of what's going on and making sure we have a very open and back and frank conversation with those stakeholders to be sure that what we're hearing is what they're hearing and we agree on where they're going. And then that is really proven to be a really good process for a lot of customers, provide a lot of insight and clarity into where their organization really stands. After that, we bring in subject matter experts in the first step, but the second step is when we really get into the details of where they're trying to go. Really focus in on what we hear from the interviews, what we get from surveys, what we get from the managers and the stakeholders, and get into what the courses are going to look like, what the recommendations are going to look like, make sure we're aligning folks with the correct classes. This is where we start to bring in instructors and subject matter experts with an understanding of all the different solutions and content we have available, from all the vendors, as well as our own content and some of the other independent content we work with. And so this is the part where we start to get into this, get into all that and get into the details. And this is a very close collaborative process. I think Michelle, I'm going to pause here. I think Michelle had a question come in.
We do have a question from the audience member. They say that their tech stack is all over the place and they can't find all the tools that they use in one training. So what options do they have or do we have to tailor to someone's training needs?
Yeah, a lot. So a lot of the classes we end up delivering, the content exists. It just exists in a lot of different places. And so back to the question before about using multiple cloud vendors and which one, how do we what's the value ExitCertified provides? That's exactly it. Is access to all of the authorized content, plus large network of independent content authors that are specialized in different areas. For example, we have a set of trainers, there's 2 or 3 of them that are awesome, and they've got a full curriculum around things like JavaScript, Angular, React, and in building the front end systems. And so we work very closely with them to incorporate those types of, that type of content into, into the overall solution for customers. Now, same thing with data science. We actually have a few PhDs we work with who we recently just built a program for one of the large pharmaceuticals where they wanted to break it up into 1 week chunks, 1 day chunks spread over 5 weeks, and get into some stuff I don't understand on data science. And so we were able to pull in content from a lot of different independent sources, but also from the OEM vendors that are doing things like cloud, some of the Kubernetes platforms and analytics platforms. So we're able to pull those in. We also build custom content where DevOps is the area we see this the most. A lot of folks are using Jenkins, right? But they're also using a lot of different tools along the way. And so we're able to build classes that incorporate all these different tools along the way. And so that when we put this training in front of their students, they recognize the tool sets and they recognize how a lot of these things work. And some customers are actually using training to help drive their strategy.
we talked about all the different tools out there and folks with aged skill sets and the need to get them up to speed on the new skill sets. And, it's one thing to have, the VP talking about it or emails going out or, company meetings or however the team decides they're going to push these changes down the organization. But the most effective way is to have them actually do it. And so we work with customers who are trying to drive specific change and drive specific, in the DevOps example, CI/CD pipeline creation and usage and adoption. And so we build these trainings that align with that strategy, and they put their students or their employees through these trainings, and they come out the other end, having a much better understanding for how it works, why it works the way it works. We encourage them to put folks in these classes from a bunch of different job roles. Traditionally, you have developers and operations and PMs and admins. Put them all in the same class. Let's get them all talking in class, and let's drive them through the classes that are really going to help them push this change and drive adoption for this change. So I hope that answered it. So again, I think we've kind of touched on this point, but just to reiterate, it's a very relevant number. 70% of employees are saying they don't have the skills they need, and we're absolutely seeing that. They may have parts of the skills they need. We have a lot of customers. Ansible is a popular topic where they'll come to us and they'll say, hey, we've got a team of folks, of employees that are using Ansible. They've basically forked playbooks from other projects, or a contractor wrote a bunch of playbooks, and we're essentially taking those and we're modifying them, and that's what we know about Ansible. But we recognize we need to know more. There's more features. We need to be able to build some playbooks from scratch. What can we do? And so a lot of times we're taking teams through training, more formal training on tools that they have been using. They've just been using kind of ad hoc. They've been building it out of something somewhere else. And so, a lot of customers are actually doing that. So it's not a surprise when we saw this number of 70% don't have the level of skill they need. It's absolutely true. So just using Ansible as an example of one of the tools where they're getting training for the first time on a tool they've been using for years. So getting back with the life cycle, step 3. So in this phase of the project, we're building the training plan and starting to align the job roles. The middle phase, or the last phase, we were getting into the details on the skills that were needed. Now is the part where we make sure each of the job roles has the right amount of skill or coverage for each of the topics that's needed. And so when we put this together, we figure out, is it in person? Is it self-paced? Is it live? If we're doing it virtually? A lot of times we have customers that come and say, hey, we've got this online e-learning provider and it's great. They've got a lot of content and blah, blah, blah. Well, a lot of time, utilization for self-paced is not very high, but there's absolutely a place in the programs that we build for self-paced. And so we make sure to incorporate that whenever possible, because what we want to minimize students' time in the classroom, because we know it's tough to get folks out of the office. And so we make sure we take advantage of these tools and these platforms and these products that companies have already bought, and use that as a baseline level of knowledge for students before they come into the instructor-led live classes. And so we'll often incorporate self-paced. A lot of times we'll do office hours where maybe you go through a 3 or 4 day class, and then the next week we've got an afternoon where the instructor is available for people to come back and maybe go through a lab again or ask questions. So we've got a couple of different ways we can put programs together that focus on the skills that are needed. So this part of the phase where we're kind of lining it all up, making sure it's set by job role.
Brian, I have a question from an audience member.
Uh-huh.
So for clients that require on-site training, is that something that's going to start up again soon?
Yep, we are starting to see. So when last year, about half our business was virtual and half was in person, and very quickly we were able to move pretty much all of the in-person training online, and we did it very successfully.
And so now we are starting to see companies want in-person training. And so, we do go through some safety protocols to be sure that expectations are set and, everybody's comfortable moving forward. But more and more, we are starting to put instructors back in the physical classroom with customers. And just to kind of touch on that, we do have facilities of our own where we deliver classes that are open to anybody, public open enrollment. But a lot of the programs I'm talking about in this presentation are more focused on private, so at your location or virtually for only your students. But yes, we are starting to see customers want instructors in the classroom or at their facility, and then starting to open that back up. So again, back to the skills gap that's out there that we're hearing about. And another pretty powerful number that talks about the challenges learning and development professionals are seeing because their workforces don't have the skills they need. We'll get to another slide here in a couple minutes, and it talks about retention of employees. And so, it's more important. It's very important for learning and development folks and HR folks to be able to keep great employees. And so the skills gap is a pretty alarming number for them. When you look at almost 60% recognize the need to keep up the skills of their employees. Oh, and I think I missed a slide here. It's all right. Go forward to step 5. So delivery of the training, that was the step before. So that's actually conducting the training in person. The last step is continuous improvement and taking feedback from those classes. And a lot of our instructors have been teaching for some 2-3 decades, and they have a ton of experience in the classroom. Going back to getting folks out of the office for training, we recognize that the biggest cost for anybody training their employees is their people's time away from the office. Because when they're away from the office, they're not building products, they're not working on systems, they're not doing those things, they're getting training. And so, we've already talked about the importance of actually making them more productive and helping them understand the tools they're using and make sure they use the full feature sets and reduce errors and rework and all those things. But one of the other things that we're able to do from training is take these instructors who have a tremendous amount of experience working with customers and students and provide feedback. Here's the questions the students were asking in class. There's a lot of interest around this technology. There's not very much understanding of this technology, and so your students are very adept at doing these things. Push them harder, but this is another area that you've got some skill, a bit of a gap that we should work on. And so we always take the feedback from the students and from our instructors, and we put it together into sometimes a presentation, sometimes it's just a phone conversation or some notes that we like to provide back and say, hey, here's how class went. Here's what we heard from your students. Here's some of the things that that they're excited about and that they're moving towards, and here's some of the things that you may want to put a little more attention on. And so we do provide feedback from those classes, and oftentimes customers come back and say, hey, look, you were right. This is a huge gap for us, and so we'd like to spend a little more time making sure that folks have these skills that we need. And so we do close the loop, so to speak, on the training with some follow-up to help understand what was learned and how things went. And Michelle, I don't know if did you put it up? Looks like we have another. Yep. That's it. That is another
question. So talking about feedback, do clients receive analytics for employees on self-paced or their on-demand training?
They can. So we don't do a lot of self-paced. We do have a few offerings around things like Docker and AWS. But we can provide stats and feedback on who came to class, the surveys, the quality scores, all that, student comments. We do have all those metrics that we can provide back. So yes, we do provide some analytics and some metrics back whenever possible. All Very good. So here's the slide I was talking about a few ago that talks about the importance to companies of making sure their employees have skills, and the recognition, and the way they learn this is employees are leaving if they don't, if they see better opportunity elsewhere. And so L&D, or learning and development folks, are saying, this is a huge area that we need to focus on. And we have learned and proven that when we focus on employees, we focus on their skills, we help them feel like the organization's invested in them, that they're important, that you see employee retention significantly increase. And so that's another thing we're hearing from customers is, hey, we're losing our best people. We got to keep them happy. We got to get them the skills they want. IT people are by nature curious folks, and they like to be fed new information. They like to learn about new things. They like to be challenged. And that's why they're in IT, part of the reason they're in IT. And so that's another thing we're hearing from our learning and development customer stakeholders is that, hey, we need to keep these employees engaged. They're excited about new technologies. We've got to keep this in front of them. And we need to do this because it's important for keeping them around. Few case studies. There's two of them here. So the first one is a large integrator who was had a customer that was using, I think the product was OpenShift, and they had a large audience. They needed to move through understanding the basics of containers and Kubernetes and some fundamentals of microservices, and then move them through how to actually use OpenShift. Both administrators who are supporting the platform, as well as developers who are actually building applications on the platform. And so in this particular one, they were really starting out with a pretty low level of understanding of these topics, and moving through very quickly to get their folks skilled, trained and skilled up on the platform, so they could go actually work on the customer site and make sure that the customer was getting what they needed. So I'll point out the quality score. That's an area that we absolutely focus on. It is the quality of the instructors and the deliveries that we do. The next one's a large international financial organization. This particular group is front end customer facing, so they face the retail customers. And so of course the tools are very important for millions of retail customers to be able to use on their mobile phones and to get on a website and to really do their banking. Less and less folks are going to the actual branch to do their banking, and so customers like this one, they essentially have to build that teller and that bank branch functionality into IT, and that's how they compete. And so over the past several years, we have trained, I think we trained 1,500 of their employees last year alone on a whole range of topics that a lot of them were customized to focus on the tools that they're actually using. But we're able to do that as a single source provider. We incorporate both vendor offerings as well as some of the independently authored content that we work with. And that's an ongoing project. We've seen a ton of success with that. So these two white papers are on our website if you want to download those and read a little bit more about them. Matthew, I don't know. Oh, looks like
we've linked both case studies in the chat window for anyone that wants to learn more.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So in addition to, the biggest differentiator we have right now is our ability to deliver these customized programs that tailored for the customer, and also include both vendor authorized as well as independently authored content. But there's a lot of other things that we bring to bear inside of our deliveries to be sure that they're great and we get invited back. First off is the quality scores. We're one of the few training organizations around that still has full-time instructors. We do work with contractors, but our standards for our instructors are very high. One of the advantages to having full-time employee instructors is we're able to give them time off to actually study, time away out of the classroom to study up and make sure they understand what they're teaching, and they can truly be an expert. The second thing that we do is our online delivery. We were doing online delivery for quite a while, 2-way HD video long before last year. And so we've developed not just the platform, but also the back end support to be sure that we don't have any issues around student setup. And when class starts on Monday morning or Tuesday morning or whenever it starts, all the students know how to get into class. They've troubleshot all their issues and resolved them. We also put a producer in all of our classes that is there with the instructor in case anybody does have a question. The producer can take the student to the side and help them resolve their issues, so the instructor can get on with teaching class and doesn't have to spend time at the start of class or time in the middle of class troubleshooting student issues. We have somebody there to support that. And then the last piece is the end-to-end customer care. With all these changes, we're not a off-the-shelf training company anymore. That was 10 plus years ago. Everything now and what customers are buying are that full service solution. We've really, the industry, or a lot of folks, some of the folks in our industry, and including us, have elevated, from that just training provider to more of a consultative solutions provider, because the needs are so complex and they are so varied and they come from a lot of different sources. And so it's forced us to move into a role where end-to-end customer care is key to our business and key to success.
So I'm going to jump in to talk about the concern of cost around IT training. I think we've all learned some more about the value of it and really the need to stay progressive in the IT industry. And it does come at a cost. So we are ready to launch our Summer 500 promo. So this is an opportunity to save up to $500 off public training, or $500 per day on your private training. Two great opportunities, and I've just linked all of the details in the chat window where you can learn more about the terms and conditions around that promo. And specifically for your private training, I want to invite you to open a conversation with us. We're here to learn and to tailor your needs to exactly what you need, whether that's on-site, and really getting specific to your course of interest, number of students, location, etc.
Great, thanks, Michelle.
We are moving into the question and answer part of the presentation. So we had some great questions along the way. And again, I just want to open up the floor for anyone else to really get specific to something they may need an answer to, anything generally. And as Brian had mentioned, we can open up anyone's microphones too. So if you want to either raise your hand in the participants panel, there is a raised hand icon, or send us a message in the chat and we would love to have that conversation.
Yeah,
if something comes up